Hi, my name is Andy, welcome back to my channel, and today you're just gonna listen to me ramble a little bit. That's what this is. So today I wanted to talk about annotating my books, because I never have, but I want to, if that makes sense. This is something that I've been thinking about for a really long time, for a number of years. I want to talk about annotating my books. And this thought process for me started back when I was in college and I had a meeting with a professor of mine, and my professor was looking at me flipping through my big Norton anthology or whatever that we were reading for the class, and he was like, "Do you not write in your books? And why don't you write in your books?" Kind of like taking it for granted that people do write in their books, and I had never considered it before. I'd never thought about doing it. And so, and since then I've kind of spent a lot of time thinking about it, and the topic just kind of came back into my life recently. I watched a lot of videos from people on YouTube talking about annotating their books and writing in their books and why they do and how they do and things like that. I've watched a lot of people talking about it, and I've also had a couple of instances within the last couple of months where I've had books that I've wanted to annotate. So basically, I really want to annotate my books. Like, I want to have things to say and opinions, and I want to write them down, and I love, Ariel Bissett talked about this idea that I love when it comes to annotating books, which is basically to annotating your books and then letting people borrow them is basically like letting people borrow your experience of the book too, and I really love that idea. I think that's great. But at the same time, that means that I have to then annotate my books. And for some reason, there's still a stumbling block there for me. And making this video is part of me trying to figure out, like, this ramble is me attempting to work through what that stumbling block is, because I want to annotate my books. I want to have annotated books. I want a lot of things, and I just don't do it. And so I'm trying to figure out why. So when it comes to annotating books, I have only ever annotated 3 of the books in my collection, and I have gathered them here for you, and that is the Beecham's source book for exploring young adult fiction about Harry Potter. This is a teacher's aid or teacher's guide to teaching Harry Potter, and I have annotated the first 100 pages heavily. I have heavily annotated the first 100 pages, mostly because it is very wrong. in my estimation of its interpretation of Harry Potter and other things in it, I find it very wrong. Let's see if I can find some of the... I couldn't even finish it. I've kept it because, you know, I like having annotated books. I've decided that all of these individual little annotations are going to take too long to explain, but basically, this book pissed me the fuck off. It pissed me off. I didn't like it. I didn't like reading it. I did not have a good time with this book. It makes me angry, and it makes me angry to go back and look at these annotations, to a certain extent, because they're stupid. Because this book posits things that it has little evidence for, or states things as facts without citing any sources from the books, and just kind of says, like, it's like the person is trying to explain the story, but without ever referencing the story and saying, this is how I came up with this interpretation, this is where I got this from, this is what, or like exaggerating things until they don't really match the source material anymore. There's a theory in here about how Harry has a dual personality, and it's just kind of like, this is based on the first 3 books, maybe the first, like, when this was published, the first book, like, when this was published, the series wasn't finished, because this was published in 2000, and so I believe that it only covers the first 3 books. And so it posits things that, like, may turn out to be true later, but there's no source material for in the first 3 books. And so, like, as a person who's read past, and, like, some of these things that you're saying are right, some of these things that you're saying are correct, but where did you get it? Because clearly, it wasn't from the first 3 books. And I don't understand how you think you can posit these sorts of things without citing any sources. Like, yeah, I know your sources are the Harry Potter series, but you still have to say, you still have to say, this is how I got to this point. There's a note in here, which is, Hogwarts could be considered a charm school, not only teaching students how to cast spells, but also insisting they master etiquette, such as using titles when addressing professors. Because regular school doesn't require you to use titles when you address teachers, that's not true. That's not true. It's just not the case. Like, maybe nice teachers will let you call them by something other than their, like, title of Mr. Last Name, or Miss Last Name, or Mrs. Last Name, but, like, we still have to call teachers and professors by titles, unless they're, like, chill. So, it's not different. Hogwarts isn't a special school for requiring students to use respectful titles with teachers. That's just a school thing. And it's just more things like that, where it's just kind of like, this isn't... The tunnel between the Whomping Willow and the Shrieking Shack represents both danger and comfort to Harry. What? Why would it represent comfort to Harry? The only time he's there is when he's in danger. And that's not explained anywhere. That's a statement that's left to sit and grow mold, I guess? I don't know. It's not explained. Like, where did you get that? You can't just say something and then not back it up. That's not how nonfiction writing works. So, like, there's that book that I've annotated. That's one of the books I've annotated. One of the other books I've annotated in my collection is called Angels of Music. I think I've mentioned this in a previous video very recently. Again, I only really read the first 100 pages of this, but the first 100 pages are heavily annotated because this book is poorly written. It's done badly. There's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't make sense. There's a lot of characterization that is badly done. Irene Adler is a character in this story, like the Sherlock Holmes Irene Adler, but this is Irene Adler before she exists in the Sherlock universe. So this is like young Irene Adler. But in this, she's some sort of like brawler, which flies in the face of the character that she plays in the character that she ends up being. And she is like, she's given this, she's from New Jersey apparently, but she's given this like written in accent. So the author has written in that she speaks differently. And the written in accent is more Texas than New Jersey? It's just wrong. It just strikes me as wrong, and it doesn't feel like the character that you come to know and love in the later series, or even like a prototype of that character. It feels like a different person. And so, I just have issues. I have issues with it. I have issues, and so I've heavily annotated the first 100 pages. I wasn't able to go on with the rest of it, but I heavily annotated that. You're seeing a theme in the things that I annotate. The third thing in my collection that I know for a fact that I've annotated is Peter Brook's The Empty Space. My annotations are literally me underlining stuff that I think is important, or stuff that I think is particularly resonant. This one is not because I think it's bad. This one I'm not annotating because I think it's awful. This one I'm annotating because I want to remember what's in it. I'm annotating this in more of a studying kind of a situation, or more of a I want to remember this later, or when I flip through this I want to be able to come back and look at and see, when we say deadly, we never mean dead. We mean something depressingly active, but for this very reason, capable of change. And things like that, like, interesting things. So this is the outlier, in terms of, but for the most part, the things that I annotate are things that piss me off, more than anything else. And I kind of want to change that, because I want to have more of this kind of annotation in my life, in terms of critically looking at the books that I'm reading, and being able to pick out the interesting bits. And I want to be able to do that with more than nonfiction. I want to be able to do that in my fiction and find the parts that matter and figure out how it works. But I have a stumbling block. See, this has all come up, A, because I've been thinking about it forever, but B, because I'm reading Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal, and this book is so far pretty good. You know, I'm on chapter 5. It's lovely and sweet and what I was expecting to a certain extent, but like, you know, on the whole, pretty, nice, fluffy, and I want to start what I'm thinking of as like a long-term project and kind of look through books, the books that I own, and kind of annotate them and critically look at them and break down the structure of the book or the story or the series, because structure is one of those things that I am personally super interested in when it comes to a book. How is it structured? What pieces get put in what places, and what does that mean to the story as a whole? How does that work in the story as a whole? In the Air Chronicles series, the structure is super interesting because, unlike most series, you're not following the same viewpoint character through the whole thing. The first book, the second book, the third, the fourth, and the fifth all have different viewpoint characters. And that's super interesting to me in terms of structure and what that means and what that does for the story, because it means that we don't feel like we have a linear narrative, like, through the whole series. Structure, yeah, basically, structure is important and super fascinating to me. I don't know if I left off in the middle of a tangent. If I did, sorry. So yes, and I want to kind of get into paying closer attention to the structure of books, and I'm trying to think through the best way to go about that and how to do it. And I think one of the main ways, because one of the things, I don't necessarily want to start like a notebook or a journal that's devoted to like separately analyzing those structures, and it would just be more efficient to annotate in the book and note structural things specifically, like as I'm reading, and annotate it. And yet, I have difficulty getting over this obstacle about annotating books that I like reading, books that I'm enjoying. There's this idea in my head, I think, that writing in a book is equatable to destroying it to a certain extent, and I still haven't fully gotten over that, and I want to, because, like I said, I have all these projects in mind in order to, like, specifically delve into literature in different ways to kind of grow my own understanding of the world, and the literary world, or whatever. But I still have this thing holding me back about writing in books being a way of destroying them, and I don't necessarily want to use post-it notes because that just seems like a hassle, and so I find myself unable to annotate this, or unwilling to annotate this necessarily, just because I find myself unwilling to destroy it because it's so pretty and pristine at the moment. Maybe I just need to read more books that I actively dislike and annotate those, and then that'll fulfill my annotating bug that I have. But I really want to pay attention to structure and those kinds of things, and I can't if I can't notate, at least in my own head. The other conclusion that I've been coming to recently is that in order to adequately talk about and think through things critically, I personally need to read them more than once. Is also interesting, and may have something to do with the annotating process, because I think to adequately do it, at least for me, I have to read it once for fun, and read it for enjoyment, and make my way through it the one time. And then if I want to delve into it critically and see how it works, and pull all the pieces apart and fiddle with the gears, essentially, I need to read it a second time, and then maybe the second time is the annotating part for books that I like. That seems like a good place to end this. Thanks for sitting through the ramble, I guess. Have a good life.